Have you ever wished you could just take some time and go to a private retreat facility, maybe by a lake or something, maybe out in the country in a beautiful, beautiful setting, and just be all by yourself, no one else around? Beautiful place, time to get alone with God, time to pray and read your Bible and maybe walk around the grounds and meditate and just be at peace and really hear from God. And most people never really get much of a chance to do something like that. Well, in 2009, in the spring, I was pastoring a small church in Framingham, Massachusetts. I had been the pastor for many, many years. And I was frankly burnt out and in a very bad place. And the church had a lot of issues. A lot was going on. I can't get into all that. But my ecclesiastical officials felt that I really needed a time to go on sabbatical. I really needed some time off, and it was arranged that I would go down to Springfield, Missouri and stay with my daughter, Amy, and her husband. And I would stay down there a month. Really, sabbatical should be at least 3 months, but there's just no way we could do it. So it was going to be a month, but my ecclesiastical official said to me, it can't be just staying with your daughter and her husband. You've got to take a few days when you're down there and go to a retreat facility and spend some time alone with God and really clear your head, really seek the Lord. And I did a lot of researching about retreat facilities in Missouri, and I did find a place about an hour outside Springfield, Missouri, and I made arrangements to stay there and have a private retreat. It was actually going to be it was in late April of 2009, from a Tuesday morning through to a Friday morning. And the time came, I went to Missouri. I did have the time with my daughter, but the time came for me to go on the retreat. And you brought in your own food and so forth, and it's not a whole lot. I mean, I brought in guy food like ramen soup, cereal, milk, Kraft macaroni and cheese, things like that. I brought in things like that. I believe I brought in instant coffee too. I had to have some coffee. But I arrived at the retreat facility on a Tuesday morning, parked. There was a large homemade sign there on the retreat house that somebody had made because there was another guy that was going to be there having his own private retreat at the same time. I didn't actually know that when I booked the retreat, but I found that out when I got there. I'm not going to use his real name. I'm going to call him Charlie, but that's not his real name. But there was a big homemade sign saying, "Welcome, Bob. Welcome, Charlie. Hope you have great retreats." And I found my way to a building which had an office. It was the retreat center's office. I met the gentleman who was in charge of the place. Very interesting guy. I'd say he was around 60. He was a Roman Catholic priest, not wearing any kind of clerical garb, just wearing civilian clothing. Very nice guy. Told me he had spent many years as a Methodist minister, had been married, had kids. After his wife passed away, he converted to Roman Catholicism, became a Roman Catholic priest, and here he was now running this retreat facility. And he took me around and showed me the grounds, and there were a number of, not rigid rules and regulations, but they did have policies and rules and that sort of thing. And he kind of went over all of that with me and took me down by the retreat house. They had a very nice retreat house there, 2 levels. So I was on the lower level. The other gentleman, Charlie, was on the upper level. It was both rustic and high-end. And I know you might say, how could a retreat house be rustic and high-end? That seems contradictory. I know it does seem contradictory, but it was both of those things. Very nice place. And just a very short distance from the retreat house was the lake, a big, beautiful lake. Big, beautiful place where you could just sit on like a beach and relax or anything you wanted to do, really. And while we were looking at the house and so forth, the other gentleman that I call Charlie came out. He was on the second floor. There was a little balcony, and he came out and stood on the balcony. And the priest said, "Oh, there's Charlie. Hi, Charlie." And I looked at Charlie. And Charlie looked like he had just come out of central casting to play the role of deranged serial killer. He wasn't smiling. As I recall, he didn't say hello. He just glared at us. He looked terrifying. I'd say he was a guy about 35, and I thought, what am I getting myself into? And shortly thereafter, I was unpacking the car and bringing things in and so forth. And he came downstairs and did meet me and said hello. And we talked a little bit. He had, like a lot of people do in rural Missouri, he sounded just like a hillbilly. And I don't mean that to make fun of people in Missouri, just in that part of the state, a lot of the people do sound kind of like that. And he said to me, because there was a rule that as far as if there was somebody else there on retreat, if you happen to run into them going into the house or coming out of the house or on the grounds or something, you could certainly say hello, but you weren't to disturb them. And Charlie said to me, "You won't even know I'm here." And I said, well, that's great. And so that was fine. And I forget what I did for much of the rest of the day. I think the whole time I was there, I was journaling, I was praying, I was reading scripture. He had a whole library of books in that retreat house. So there were different good books I picked up and was reading through as well. At times I'd walk around the grounds. Anyway, that night I had a dream, and it really wasn't a dream. It was really a nightmare. And the bed, it wasn't really a bedroom. The bed was like just off of where the kitchen was in this place on the first floor. But in my dream, I was at this same retreat facility, and a woman came with a school bus full of little kids, like maybe first graders. There were a whole bunch of them. The woman in the dream, I guess, was both a school bus driver and a teacher. But in the dream, Charlie was out to kill the school bus driver and every one of those kids. And it was terrifying. And he was prowling around the grounds and just waiting to make his move to kill every single one of them. Now, of course, dreams are not like reality. In real life, I had my cell phone with me. I would have called 911 on my cell phone, but in my dream, I didn't do that. In my dream, I was running all around the property. I went up to where the office was, where I had met the priest. I was all around the property looking for the priest to warn the priest that Charlie was about to murder that woman and all the little kids in the school bus. I never found the priest. It was terrifying. I woke up, and you can imagine just kind of trying to catch my breath and really feeling fearful and thinking, oh man, what have I gotten myself into? And all of a sudden, what did I hear but a voice behind me which said, "Here's a couple biscuits." Here's a couple biscuits? And I turned around, and Charlie was standing there, and he had put a little plate on the table, and on it were two cooked, those Pillsbury type biscuits? You buy those little canisters in the dairy case, and you cook them for a few minutes in an oven, and you know what I mean. He had a couple of those, and I'm thinking, what is he planning to do? Poison me? But I didn't know what to do. I just said, oh, well, okay, thank you. And he went back upstairs. I had my cereal. I did have the biscuits. I didn't die, obviously, but that was kind of unnerving. And later on that day, and again, I'd be walking around the grounds, or I'd be journaling, or I'd be reading, or I'd be praying, or even maybe just sitting down by the lake, depending on when it was in the day. But at one point, he came down. He had a bunch of brochures that he wanted to show me. And he had brochures about getting a fishing license in Missouri and getting a hunting license in Missouri. And he was telling me in great detail all that's involved to get a fishing license and a hunting license in Missouri. I don't know why he was telling me this, because I wasn't interested in getting a fishing or hunting license in Missouri. And then he had brochures about a bunch of retreat facilities. And he was telling me, I've been to this one and I've been to that one and I'm going to try out this. And I'm thinking, what does this guy do for a living? He just goes around staying at retreat facilities. And I don't know how long he spent with me, maybe an hour. And it was just kind of strange. And then, he went back upstairs, and there was always just kind of an unsettling feeling. So that was Wednesday. And then we'll move into Thursday. And Thursday, the same thing. I'm reading, I'm journaling, I'm praying, I'm walking around the grounds. And at one point, there was a little room, kind of an entry room that faced the part of that faced the lake. There was a part of the retreat house that faced the beautiful lake. And when you walked up from the lake, the first place you walked into was this. It was just kind of, I guess maybe you'd call it a mud room. It was a small room. It had a table. It had two doors. One led to a stairway that went up to where Charlie was staying, and one led into the apartment where I was staying. Or you could just sit at this table. There was a table and chairs, and there was artwork. They had watercolors there that you could use, and sketch pads and pencils and things like that. There was a piece of paper. I say a piece of paper. It was typed up or whatever that said you could feel free to use the art supplies, the watercolors, the sketch pads, and to make artwork and to hang it up on the wall. And there were people who had done watercolor drawings and sketches, and there were a number of them hung up on the wall. And it was I certainly wasn't going to do that. I draw like a 3-year-old, so I wasn't going to do anything like that. But I'm just sitting there kind of reading, doing different things. And suddenly, behind me, I hear, "Them's real nice pictures." And once again, I just about dropped. And I turned around, and it's Charlie. And I think this time I said, you know, Charlie, you don't need to be sneaking up behind me like that. That really isn't a good idea. But he's talked to me, and he said, one of the things I do like to do myself when I come to a retreat like this is artwork. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. And he said, I've actually been doing some artwork on this retreat, and I've been working really hard at it. And would it be all right if I came down tonight around supper time and showed you the artwork I've been doing? And I said, well, sure, I guess that would be fine. If you want to do that, sure, that would be nice. I'd like to see it. So I don't know what I had for supper that night, Kraft macaroni and cheese, ramen soup, I don't know. But he came downstairs, and this is now Thursday, supper time. Came downstairs, and he had a bag, and he pulled a book out of the bag, and it was a soft cover book. And I looked, it was a coloring book. It was a children's coloring book. And he opened it up, and it was a children's coloring book about a pirate and his friends and his adventures that you would maybe give to a 6-year-old. And they were connect the dots activities, like connect the dots to see what the treasure was the pirate found. Or maybe connect the dots to see the sea creature that the pirate met, and you connect the dots and it's a dolphin or something like that. Well, he had done the connect the dots exercises for several of these and colored them all in. And he was really proud of it. And that was his artwork. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, this guy's got to be crazy. But what could so I said, well, that's nice, Charlie. And I thank you for bringing down the artwork. That's great that you did that. And then he asked me, well, could I come down a little later and we could sit in the living room and I can visit with you? And it was like, what was I going to say? So I said, fine. I had my supper, cleaned up from supper. He came downstairs. We went and sat in the living room. They had, like, as I recall, maybe a sofa, maybe a love seat, maybe a couple chairs. I sat on the sofa. I expected Charlie to sit on one of the chairs or the love seat. Charlie came down and sat right next to me. And I mean right next to me, right on my left. I mean maybe an inch from me. And I'm sitting there trying to have some sort of a conversation with him. He's an inch to my left. It's like we're on a date. It was bizarre and it was terrifying. And finally, after a few minutes, I said, you know what, Charlie, this isn't working. I need you to sit across from me. If we're going to have a conversation, this is not working. So he sat across from me. I don't even remember what we talked about. Whatever it was very superficial. And I'm sitting there talking, and all of a sudden I realized something. I realized Charlie wasn't awake. He was snoring. He was sleeping. And I thought, oh my, what do I do now? So I got up. I kind of shook Charlie awake and I said, Charlie, you were sleeping. Now you really need to go upstairs. And he said he would, but then he said, can I come down tomorrow morning? The next morning was Friday. Can I come down tomorrow morning and do my laundry? Now, one of the rules or policies that they did tell you in the beginning, and it was in the materials you read, was that the lower level apartment had a washer and dryer. And if someone else was on retreat upstairs, they could come down on that final Friday morning and do their laundry. That was okay. And I said, well, all right, Charlie, you can come down tomorrow morning. That'll be fine. He went upstairs. And I went to sleep that night and I woke up. I woke up hearing all this noise, all kinds of noise, and there was a light on in the apartment, and I'm smelling all this smoke. And I turned around and the washer was on, the dryer was on, and Charlie was there with a light on, and Charlie was smoking a cigarette. And that was one of the big rules of the place, is absolutely no smoking. And I'm thinking, well, what else is new? So I don't know if I just kind of pretended I was asleep or what, but he did his laundry. He finally went upstairs. Around 6:30 a.m., I heard him go out. I heard his footsteps go down the stairs. And then I heard him, he had a light pickup truck. I heard him start the light pickup truck. And I kind of got up and I went over to the window and I'm peeking through the blinds. And he started the truck up and he's revving the engine and he's revving the engine and he's revving the engine and he's revving. And this went on for like 15 minutes. And I'm just thinking, why are you just sitting there revving the engine? Why don't you go? Well, after 15 minutes, he backed up and he pulled out and he left. And as he was driving away, I was yelling, yes, yes, yes. I can't even tell you how relieved I felt. And I did do my own laundry, in fact, that morning. But then I went up to what was his apartment, and I spent a couple hours up there just reading the Bible, praying, whatever. I figured, why not? And I left, I guess it was around 11. And that retreat sure wasn't how I had planned it. I mean, that was bizarre. That was really bizarre. And, at the time it seemed like, I was supposed to have a time to myself. Quiet, peaceful, safe. What was that all about? But, real life isn't always quiet and peaceful and safe and tranquil. Ministry isn't that. Ministry can be anything but that. And yet, despite all those interruptions from Charlie, I did do some journaling. I had some great time in scripture. I had some great time reading good Christian books. Great time walking around the property and enjoying the look, just the scenery of the lake and all of that. The next 3 years after that in my personal life, I wish I could tell you they were magnificent. They weren't. They were horrible. They were horrible. The church closed. I was in very, very bad shape. I was suicidal. I was under a psychiatrist's care. It was very, very bad. But as I think back upon that retreat, I realize now what God was doing and what God was showing me. God was showing me that, life isn't all peaceful and quiet and nice and safe. Sometimes it's anything, but sometimes it's bizarre and scary and crazy. But in the midst of that retreat, which in some respects was bizarre and scary and crazy, God was there. And God did meet me. And God did minister to me. And the interesting thing is, as I look back upon that many years later now, I think that was kind of one of the most special experiences of my life. And realizing God saw me through that retreat. God saw me through the next 3 years. I didn't kill myself. I didn't end up in a mental institution. I actually came out of that pretty much okay. And I'm not going to say that the years since 2012 have been all perfect. They haven't been. There have been ups and downs. And I still have some great challenges in my life. But I can say that I'm a lot closer to God than I was 10 years ago, 13 years ago, whatever. And I've been able to minister to a lot of people and help a lot of people, though I'm not pastoring. I haven't pastored now in many years. So I look back upon that nightmare on the retreat and all that went with it. And I can say today that I'm glad I went through it. And I learned quite a bit from that. I hope this has been a blessing to you. I'd love to have you share it with other people. God bless you. Thank you.